This video is the final video of a three-part video series on the production of these wood segmented eggs. These eggs are normally referred to as Pysanky eggs. Pysanky eggs are normally produced from real eggs that have been written on using beeswax and then dipped in a variety of richly colored dyes. The designs on the eggs are often very intricate and include elaborate symmetrical patterns. They have normally symbols of the Christian faith by the Polish, Ukrainian, and Slovak communities. Today, many people around the world produce these eggs around Easter time. In the last couple of years, the Pysanky eggs have become a symbol for hope for peace amid the Ukrainian war. There are numerous examples of these Pysanky eggs on many websites. These are my versions of Pysanky eggs, which are wood segmented eggs that I produced for this three-part video series. In part one of this video series, I described using some long boards, then slicing off some thin wedges, and then taking these wedges and then assembling these into a perfect circular segmented disc. And then using a variety of jigs I custom designed in that video to glue these up to get accurate, symmetrical disc. Using a variety of different jigs and different sizes. And after they're all glued up using epoxy cement, you end up with a segmented disc such as this or this. And then in part two of this video series, I took these segmented discs and then I sliced these into thin, smaller disc, much like this, or these, a little more elaborate ones. And then I take these same discs and then I glue them back together, rotating each one a small amount to give me some unique patterns, and then gluing them up on some custom jigs I made for that video to enable the accurate positioning and alignment of the segmented discs to produce these unique patterns. And after they're glued up, you end up with a variety of segmented disc assemblies such as this, with all different unique patterns. In this video, I'll be taking these disc assemblies and aligning them, gluing them together to produce a pattern from which I can produce my segmented eggs. In this third and final video in this series, I'll describe the assembly of these segmented discs into unique patterns for the segmented eggs. The segmented egg disc assemblies are then turned on my lathe to required shape, sanded and finished with bush oil. In this video, I once again use my 3D printer to produce various size face plates for my lathe, and also some custom vacuum chucks for the finishing of the bottoms of the eggs. I also designed and print out some custom egg holders with my name and date indicated on the base of each of these egg holders. At the end of this video, I'll show some close-ups videos of each of the 19 segmented Pysanky eggs produced in this video series. I just put together a collection of some of the wood-turned eggs I've produced over the years. I actually produced a lot more than this. Most of them I've given away as Christmas gifts. But this just shows the sequence of some of the various eggs I've made over the years. My very early eggs were just laminated eggs, where I just laminated pieces of boards together and then turned the eggs. That was my early one. I made these about 7-8 years ago. Then I made a lot of segmented eggs, eggs such as this. Just laminated boards, and I did videos on this also. I made a bunch of different styles, some smaller ones, and some larger ones like this one here. These came out quite nice. So I made a bunch of those. Then I made a bunch of dizzy eggs too. And actually I did videos on these. Other very dizzy eggs such as this. So they got unique patterns. Along that same line I made this egg, which is actually hollow in the inside. This top comes off. And it's hollow inside. So that was a unique one I made several years ago. And again, I did a video on that also. And then recently I made some miniature ones. I made some miniature dizzy eggs. It's just some of the small miniature dizzy eggs I've made over the years. And I made some small segmented eggs, which I showed in a recent video. Which is very small segmented eggs. I've also made some Celtic pattern eggs. This is a very simple one here. Then a more complex one here. which is another technique. So various techniques, everything from just laminating boards to Celtic rings to segmented eggs to dizzy pattern eggs. Before I got started on design and assembly of the various segmented egg patterns, I did need to slice some additional thin segmented disc. In the previous video in this 3-part video series, I sliced all the segmented discs with various patterns of alternating and contrasting woods. I next assembled a number of 18 segmented discs of a single colored wood, and then sliced them as shown here using the Accu-Slice system. These thin discs varied in thickness between 0.025 inches thick and a 1/4 inch thick. I'll be used as separation spacers between the more elaborate segmented pattern disc. The 1/4 inch thick segmented disc will be used for the top and bottom segmented disc on the eggs. To design the various patterns for the segmented eggs, I took the various segmented disc assemblies produced in the previous video and then stacked them on top of one another. I then separated these disc assemblies with several of the other single-colored assembled discs in order to develop some unique segmented disc patterns for the eggs. And this is the final segmented disc pattern, which will produce a segmented egg, much like this segmented egg. This assembly of segmented disc is now ready for glue up. I continue this glue up and clamping process for the remaining disc assemblies, usually gluing up separate sections of the disc assemblies before the final glue up of the completed assembled disc assembly. And now ready for the glue up of the final pieces. What I'm doing here is actually marking the edges of the segments. On the dark wood it's pretty hard to see the segments, and I want to get them aligned properly. So that's why I put the black lines on there. But again, applying glue to both surfaces of the wood, clamping them lightly, making sure they don't slip, readjusting them as they're needed, and then gluing on the final piece to complete the assembly. And then I clamp these and allow these to dry overnight. So in the previous 2 videos I made all the components of these segmented eggs, and now I've assembled them and glued them up to finished items ready to be turned on a lathe. And I did turn one of these just to test it out. This is the initial one I just finished. So now the rest of these need to be turned. So that's the next project. That's the easy part. I spent 4 weeks cutting these and assembling these, and to turn it takes about 15-20 minutes. So turning is the quickest part of the operation. The setup and the segmenting and the gluing, that takes time. So now we're ready to turn these and finish them on the lathe. In order to turn these eggs on my lathe, I made 2 additional accessories for my lathe, which I 3D printed with my new 3D printers, which has become a very useful tool in my shop. The first thing I printed were these face plates for the lathe. These again, they're face plates all turned, all threaded, and a lot cheaper to make than buying them. Typically these cost like maybe around $40–45 out of aluminum. It normally requires less than $10 of filament material to produce one of these face plates, but it does take from 4 to 10 hours to print each of these face plates. But this printing time is mostly unattended time. For this segmented egg project, I did produce 12 of these face plates. There will be a separate video on the design and production of these face plates in the near future, and it will also be available on my website if you don't have access to a 3D printer. In order to turn the top of the lathe to get both sides, you need a vacuum chuck. So I also made some vacuum chucks for my lathe. And this is a typical piece to start it out with. And then I make collars to go on top. This is a softer plastic material, so it gives a better seal on the filament. For example, this goes in here, and the egg gets like this and sealed on the lathe. That worked out quite nicely. And I did 3D print my covers. This is made out of a flexible PLA material. So I'll be testing out both of these, both the face plates and these new vacuum chucks on the lathe when I'm making these new eggs. Turning the segmented eggs on a lathe normally takes only 15 to 30 minutes per egg. The following example of turning one of the segmented eggs. I normally prefer to use the round carbide tool for turning the basic profile of the egg shape. I first turn the top section of the egg with the pointed top surface of the egg on the right side facing the lathe tailstock. I do take note that the turning center of the egg will be slightly to the left of the actual center of the egg. I then switch to the pointed carbide tool to shape the base of the egg. I do take care not to cut too deep on the base of the egg, as I do not want it to break off. The final cutoff will be done later using the vacuum chuck. I then switch back to the round carbide tool to smooth out the surface of the egg. I next sand the surface of the egg, starting with 180 grit sandpaper, and then progressively sand with finer sandpapers, ending up with a 600 grit sandpaper to give me a very smooth finished surface. I unscrew the egg and faceplate from the lathe headstock and screw it into the rotating adapter on the lathe tailstock. I next screw one of my vacuum chucks with a sealing washer onto the lathe headstock. A vacuum pump was previously attached to the far left side of the headstock. The segmented egg on the tailstock is then pushed tightly into the vacuum chuck and the vacuum is turned on to firmly hold the egg in place. Aligning the segmented egg while still on the faceplate assures a perfect alignment of the segmented egg on the lathe. I then use my pointed carbide tool to do a final shaping of the base of the egg, and then use a parting tool to cut the egg loose from the wood plate on the faceplate. The vacuum chuck is now holding the egg firmly in place to enable the final sanding of the segmented egg base. The 19 segmented eggs have all been turned, and now it's ready to start finishing them. And I usually like to seal them with bush oil. That's an initial seal. Usually I get at least 2, maybe 3 coats of bush oil. So the first thing I do is get a tack cloth and just make sure I remove all the dust before I put the finish on. And I like the bush oil because it not only seals the wood, but it tends to bring out the color also. So it usually deepens the color of the woods. And these are all natural woods. There's no dyes in these woods. These are all natural colored woods. And you usually use bush oil on a lint-free cloth. I give it a nice coat, and I'll let this set for an hour or so, then I'll wipe it and then let it dry overnight before I give it a second coat. There's one done. And you can see the difference in color there between the two. You see how that bush oil deepens the color. This is a red heart and maple, and this is a padauk and maple. And this is padauk and tigerwood. Finish. Okay, they've all been coated with a single coat of bush oil, and now I'll let these set for probably an hour, and I'll wipe off the excess oil and let them dry overnight. This concludes this video on the production of these 19 segmented eggs that I produced for this video, and some of the miniature ones I made in the previous video. I produced these segmented eggs to present to my various relatives and friends during this Easter season. If you want to see additional details on how these eggs were made and some of the jigs I used to assemble the eggs, please refer to the previous 2 videos listed on our YouTube website. Here is some close-up video of the finished segmented eggs. At the very end of the video, I'll have actual shots of the individual eggs on a turntable so you can actually see each egg individually. But these were given 3 coats of bush oil. About 6 months ago, I purchased my first 3D printer. And since that time, I've added 2 additional 3D printers to my shop. They've been proved invaluable for the custom design of jigs for my Accu-Slice system, as well as other accessories, tool holders, and storage containers for my shop. In this video, I designed and 3D printed a variety of different size face plates for my lathe. Purchasing aluminum face plates from a lathe usually costs between $40 and $50 each. I was able to print out the face plates using the 3D printers for a material cost less than $10 each. However, it did require 4 to 10 hours to print out each of the face plates. These new 3D printed face plates worked out quite well for the production of these segmented eggs. I'll be producing a separate video in the future describing the design and production of these face plates, and I plan on making them available on our website if you do not have a 3D printer. I also designed and 3D printed some custom vacuum chucks that I used to enable the turning of the bottom of each of the segmented eggs. I actually made 10 different sizes of vacuum chucks, from 2 inches up to 5 inches top face diameter, to enable the holding of the various size eggs during the turning process. The vacuum chucks consist of 2 parts. The main body or base was printed out using PLA plus filament material. In order to get a good vacuum tight seal, I designed and printed out a separate gasket seal using TPE filament material. This TPE filament material produces seals that are much more flexible with a consistency much like silicone or Buna. Again, there will be a separate video in the future describing the design and production of these vacuum chucks. I also printed out these custom egg holders for each of the eggs, once again using the PLA filament material of a variety of different colors for these egg holders. I also printed my name and date of production in raised letters on the base of each of the egg holders. Once again, thank you for watching this video. If you have any other questions, concerns, or comments, please give us a call or drop us an email. The following are some close-up videos of the 19 segmented Pysanky eggs produced in this video series.